Hi, Joe. Thanks for coming out. My name is Azim, and I'm a part of the student group Students United for Palestinian Equal Rights. And basically, what our group tries to do is create awareness for the plight of Palestinians. Kind of simple. So, firstly, please take food, pizza, and drinks because I think we have a lot of extra. So, feel free to grab some. So this event is called A Wall is a Wall, and we have activist Randy Felder based in Los Angeles. And he recently went to Palestine a few weeks ago. So he's gonna like sort of discuss like that struggle and how it relates to like Latin American struggles that are currently going on. And before we start, kind of want to mention our sponsors. So obviously, Super Students United for Palestinian Equal Rights is sponsoring this event, and our co-sponsors Mecha and MSA. And with that, where did Randy go? And with that, Randy, take it away.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, are we good?
Yeah, we're good.
All right. I want to say something first. You guys are gonna have to excuse me if it doesn't look like I'm looking at you directly, because I'm looking at the audience, but the audience is on my screen, and I'm looking. So now I'm looking at the camera, and now I'm looking at the audience. So I don't know if there's a difference and where I'm looking. But I want to thank everybody for the opportunity. Special shout out to Azim for allowing me this opportunity to speak with you guys on these matters at hand today. But first thing, a couple things about myself, so you know that I'm just not some random scrub or something talking to you guys. I used to be in the military myself. I was a veteran. I went to Afghanistan in 2010 and came back in 2011. I spent an entire year in Afghanistan. It is when I got out of the Army when I became very involved in activism work and trying to better the world in terms of making everybody's life in a better sense in that way. But like Azim said, I was in Palestine. It was actually a little bit longer than 3 weeks. It was about maybe 2 months ago. I was in Palestine, and I was there for a total of about 16 days, 2 weeks to 16 days. And prior to going to Palestine, I had known about everything that was happening in Palestine and all these different things. But like many things, you don't necessarily know about them until you actually go and experience them, and until you actually see them, until you're actually there and you feel it. And it wasn't like I just went to Palestine and was on some sort of, tourism tour where we went to the nice parts and all these different things. I think in the 16 days that I was there, I think I visited over 30 different cities, cities on the Israeli side of the Palestine, or Palestine as they would say, and cities in what is Palestine essentially. So I was everywhere from cities known as Ramallah, Haifa, Tukran, Nablus, many different places. Visited refugee camps, visited the nicer parts of Palestine, the more downtrodden parts of Palestine, and all these different things. But one thing that I think that many people don't necessarily know is the history of Palestine and what necessarily is happening there based off of what has happened in the past in Palestine. And one of the things that Palestine is currently under, as of right now, is a colonialism. And the thing is that we live in a time now where people, especially world leaders, and even not even world leaders, but many people try to say that colonialism is over. That colonialism no longer exists in the world that we live in because we are now modernized and there's no such thing as this anymore. Well, it's not true. What they do these days is they camouflage it as something else. They won't say it's colonialism. They'll say there's a conflict, or they'll say the country is a territory. They do this with the country, or with Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico has never necessarily been a free nation. Puerto Rico was originally inhabited by the indigenous people who were known as Taínos. And what happens was that the Spanish came through, and the Spanish raped them, they pillaged them, they executed them, they mass murdered them, they took away their culture, they took away their food, they took away everything from them. And so much in the sense that the Spanish actually had to bring in African slaves back into Puerto Rico to repopulate the population. That's how many of them they killed off. And what happens is that in I believe it was 19, I want to say 43. I don't know that off the top of my head. I think it was 43. Was that the Spanish lost the Puerto Rican colony to the U.S. And what happens is that the U.S. then colonizes Puerto Rico in their own way. But what they do is they don't call it a colony, they call it a territory, which is why Puerto Rican citizens are not even allowed to vote, but they are counted as U.S. citizens, meaning that they can serve in the military, that they can come back and forth to the United States without a passport and all these different things, but they can't even vote for a president who has control over them. They have no political say. They have Congress people and they have people, a governor, and all these different things, but their votes, if they wanted to vote in an election, it doesn't count. They still do mock votes when the presidential election comes around, but their actual votes do not count for anything. So this is one version of colonialism that is happening right now, because the Puerto Rican citizens are, for one, they have their health care is no good. All the people on the island leave the island in a mass exodus because the island is so bad. Because what happened was that U.S. Businesses came into the island of Puerto Rico, and when they came into the island of Puerto Rico, they snatched up all the business, they snatched up everything, and what they did was they put Puerto Rican citizens in debt. They put the Puerto Rican businesses that were already there in debt through many different means, which is another conversation from the time. But what they do is they put them in debt to them with debts that they cannot pay. So therefore, that is a form of slavery because you economically have a slave now who can never get out of that debt. So now you economically own that person. And what happens is that you have these Puerto Ricans that are leaving the island in such a mass exodus that they are abandoning the island, allowing American real estate investors, American millionaires, and American billionaires to come into the island and buy up the empty land that nobody longer wants. And what they do is they turn this island or this piece of land that they have into their own resort or into their own hotel or into their own private beach in which they charge people, and they make money off of this. And Puerto Rico sees none of this money. It doesn't go back to the Puerto Rican citizens. It sits in the pocket of the one that came in there and snatched up the land in the first place. And this is a form of colonialism. Of course, now the colonialism form is not necessarily that the U.S. is there killing them off with guns as they used to do with the indigenous people of America, but it's still a form of colonialism because they're killing them off systematically. They're not literally, they're massacring them, but there is still a massacre that is occurring. It's just more of a systematic massacre, a massacre that we don't necessarily see. And the same thing is kind of occurring in Palestine as well, is that you have in Palestine, you have these people there that were the original inhabitants of their land. And then in 1948, what happens is you have the initial quote-unquote invasion of Palestine. Now, many people don't know, but prior to 1948, there was already Palestinian conflicts going on with certain Zionist Jews. And by saying that, I need to state this, that Jews are not the problem. The problem is not Judaism. The problem is not Islam. The problem is not Christianity. The problem is the extremism mentality. It's the mentality that I am better than you because I am a different color than you, or because I speak a different language than you, or because I feel entitled to the land that you sit on. I feel entitled to that land. So what happens is that 1948, it's the fall of Hitler, the end of World War II, yada, yada, yada. You have the powers that be in Europe, mainly Britain. They say, well, we need a place to send all these displaced Jews. Let's send them all to Palestine. What happens is that they go to Palestine, and at first, for the most part, it was very peaceful. It was a very peaceful coexistence between the two parties. But what happens is that the rise of Zionism grows. And what Zionism, some people will tell you, what Zionists will tell you is that Zionism is just a belief that Israel should exist and that, the Jews need a place to live. Well, that's not what it is. The thing with Zionism is that Zionism is equivalent to what the KKK call themselves as Christians, or what Muslims or some ISIS members identify with Islam as. You know what I mean? It's this mentality of extremism. It's this mentality of I am right, you are wrong. This is my land. You need to leave this land now. And what's happening in Palestine is that you have Israel is there, and they are literally not only systematically killing off Palestinians, but they are massacring them too by hundreds, dozens, thousands even. You can look at pictures online and you see kids, children, little baby children, 6, 10, 12 years old, throwing rocks at tanks because the Israelis are coming into their villages. And I saw this with my own eyes. I saw this. I was there in Tukram when at nighttime the Israelis brought in tanks into Palestinian villages, and they would literally park their tanks inside of these villages, have soldiers running around with guns, snatching up children because these children were throwing rocks at their tanks. So what you have to imagine is that you're living in a country that is yours, but you have somebody coming knocking on your door saying, this land isn't yours and you need to leave. And then when you try to defend your land, they arrest you for defending your land, even though you are very much out-armed by them in that sense. And one thing that we see is that this correlation between Palestine and Puerto Rico is almost the same thing. See, the way that Israel operates is that Israel operates in the sense of they've watched every other country or every other great powered country colonialize all these other little countries. Israel has taken notes from every single one of them, and they draw from every single one of them, and then they have their master colonialism that they're going through. I mean, one thing I can admit about Israel is that they're very smart. They're very smart in the way that they have things set up there. They're very smart in the way that they operate plans. Everywhere you go in Palestine, there's a checkpoint. Everywhere. There's certain parts that you can't cross over because there's checkpoints. And at these checkpoints, you have these armed soldiers who are standing there with their guns barreling down into your car. And you have no weapons. You have no weapons. You have no knives, no nothing. And they're barreling their weapons at your car, and they're asking you to step out of the car. They're telling you to step out of the car. And if you don't step out the car fast enough, then you get shot. If you don't step out the car, or if you step out the car too fast, you get shot. And so what happens is that you have this militarization, this police state in Palestine, to where these people, they can't even leave their homes. They can't even make it to work sometimes because they are stopped by these Israeli forces who force them to get on the ground and to be searched and all these different things. You have kids, children who cannot even go to school because the Israeli forces are there. When I was there in Palestine, there was a man that we met the previous day. We met him the day after the incident occurred. His daughter was coming home from school, 6-year-old. His 6-year-old daughter was coming home from school. He was across the street from the bus stop at which she gets off the bus at. She was crossing the street to go to her dad as he's waiting for her across the street. An Israeli settler is coming down the road in his car. When the Israeli settler saw the child I'm sorry, hold on, I gotta get my lights back. Oh, they cut me off. Hold on, I'm sorry, guys. Okay. Back to business. I'm sorry about that. But as I was saying, was that when the Israeli settler saw the Palestinian child step out into the road, he sped his car up and he hits the child. The child goes flying in the air. The child lands back down in the car. When the child landed back down in the car, the father ran to the car of the Israeli settler, had to reach into the car and snatch the keys from the settler because the settler was trying to drive off after hitting this guy's child. He gets the keys from the child. He calls the Israeli soldiers, because there's no police there. There's no Israeli police. There's soldiers. Every single one of them are in the military. It's not like in the United States when you have police and you have the military. And the Israelis operate with strictly soldiers. So they all look like they're fresh out of Call of Duty. And trust me, I know what a soldier looks like because I used to be one. So they're all soldiers. Anyways, the Israeli soldiers show up. And what happens is that they take the Israeli settler and they put him off to the side. They don't arrest him. They don't put him in cuffs, anything. They don't do any of this. He admits to hitting the girl. He says, yes, I sped up the car. I hit the girl, whatever. He doesn't care. He has no remorse in his voice, nothing whatsoever. The father is bawling his eyes out. His daughter is dead. His daughter is dead because what happens is that when he called the ambulance, the Israeli ambulance decided to take 2 hours to get to the scene in the first place because it was a Palestinian child. Now, had it been an Israeli child, they would have been there in 2 minutes flat. And they did not allow a Palestinian ambulance to go out there because the Palestinian ambulance has to go through checkpoints. Well, they didn't allow a Palestinian ambulance to go through the checkpoint in order to get to the child. And what happens is in the end, basically, long story short, is sent off to a counselor for his anger management. The Israeli settlers surround the Palestinian man's home because they're fearful that he will lash out against Israelis. They surround his home, keep his home on lockdown. When we pulled up to his house, there were Israeli soldiers outside of his home. He's on lockdown because they're afraid that he's going to lash out. The child receives a Palestinian funeral, whatever happens, they're not the Palestinian funeral, I'm sorry, Muslim funeral. And the Israeli settler goes on about his way. Come to find out, the Israeli settler is later on celebrated by certain Israelis because he killed a Palestinian child. This is the mentality this is not what Judaism preaches. This is not what any religion teaches. This is an extremist mentality. This is a mentality that is poison. This is a mentality that kills, literally. And this is the mentality that Zionists here in America try to preach and push. They try to say, oh, Zionism is not bad, Israel is not bad, yada, yada, yada. It's a colonialism form. When you have somebody that can kill a child and walk away and only be counseled with anger issues, that's a problem. It's a problem when Israeli 16-year-olds are allowed to own rifles. When you're a 16-year-old Israeli, 16 years old, and you can own a rifle, that's a problem. And the thing that you see too, when it comes to another thing that you see, is the way that they systematically keep the Palestinians under control. It's the same thing they do in Puerto Rico as well, is that they don't allow Palestinians to buy land. And that if you do own land and you have a title to it, your title is no longer valid because you're under a new regime. Same thing happens in Puerto Rico, was that you had these people who said, hey, wait, this is my land. I own this land. I got this land from the Spanish. Spanish gave me this land. Well, the U.S. comes in and they say, no, this is no longer your land. We're taking away your land. And what happens is that when you get the indigenous people that try to rise up against their oppressor, the Israeli, or against the Israeli or against the American, they get shut down, automatically shut down. And what happens is too, is that a lot of people don't know this, is that in Puerto Rico, the gun laws are nearly impossible for a Puerto Rican citizen in Puerto Rico to own a gun. The reason why is because it is fear of uprising against the U.S. That's simply what it is. Because there was a time in the 1950s when the island of Puerto Rico, which is not very big, by the way, it takes about 2 hours to drive through the island, that the Puerto Rican citizens try to rise up against the U.S. with guns. I mean, they try to get violent. Many revolutions require violence. And they tried to rise up against them. And it was shut down because there was people within the Puerto Rican nationalist movement who snitched on them, which is another thing we'll get to. But they snitched on the other Puerto Ricans who were trying to rise up, and then it was shut down. Same thing has happened in Palestine. I mean, in Palestine, you still have these armed rebels who are trying to take out their oppressor. But in Palestine, a Palestinian can't even own a knife. If a Palestinian is caught carrying a knife, he goes to jail for 6 months for carrying a knife. Carrying a knife. And that is ridiculous. You know what I mean? That's ridiculous. And I'm not saying that everybody should just get guns and start killing each other. But what I'm saying is that if you are in a country and you fear the people that much holding on to guns, there's a problem not with the people but with the government. That says a lot. That's not saying that if you fear the people that much owning weapons, then there is a problem with the government. If you fear them rising up against you, that should be a hint to you. And the thing is that Israel gets $10 million a day from the U.S. just for their military. $10 million a day goes to them for military. And something isn't right about that equation. It's not correct. Here's the thing about Puerto Rico, too, is that Puerto Rico has five U.S. Army bases on the island. And like I said, the island is not that big. I don't know if you've ever been to a military base, but a military base is it's huge. And they've got 5 of them stationed in Puerto Rico in order to keep the people oppressed. You know what I mean? And one thing you also see in Palestine is you see these giant, unlike godly-looking walls that don't look like they were built by human hands. They look like they were built by demigods or something like that. And what they do is they separate the Palestinians from the Israeli territory. Let the Palestinians know, hey, this is no longer your land. Think about the mental effect this has on a child, the mental effect this has on somebody. If in 1948, if you owned a home, I think all of our grandparents, for the most part, were alive in 1948. Your grandparent, your grandmother, grandfather owned a home in 1948. Got a knock at their door. This home is no longer yours. You need to leave or we're going to kill you. That's the only options these people have. So they got up and they moved. They moved down the street. They moved down the road or whatever. Not even so many years later, they get another knock at the door. This is no longer your home. You got to leave or you're going to get killed. Same thing is happening in Puerto Rico now. The problem in Puerto Rico is that the rent is too high. There's an act right now in Puerto Rico called the Promesía Act. The Promesía Act has dropped the minimum wage down to $4.25. $4.25. No one can live off of $4.25 in an American economy. This is impossible. And what happens is that these people can't afford their rent. So you get the knock at the door, you got to go. To where? They can't afford tickets to the U.S. They're forced to live on the streets. Puerto Ricans are refugees in their own island. Refugees in their own homes, just like the Palestinians. Refugees in their own homes. And the problem is that you have, like I said, it's this extremist thinking. It's this capitalistic thinking of grab, 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 and forget to think about the people and things like this. And it doesn't work out. None of it works out. You know what I mean? And it's a ridiculous thing that is happening in Puerto Rico, in Latin America in general. Latin America in general has been colonized by God knows how many westernized countries. And it still continues to this day. Just because it's not called colonialism anymore does not mean that it does not exist. And this is something that we have to be aware of, especially as American citizens, that these things are happening right before our very eyes. And we don't even know it. We have no idea that it's occurring. I mean, where do you think Trump got the idea for these giant walls from? This wasn't something he was just dreamed of one day. It's in Israel right now. There are ungodly-like walls. They look like something out of a Lord of the Rings movie. Remember in I don't know if you've ever seen Lord of the Rings, but there's a part where they approached, I forgot what it was called, the castle or whatever, I forgot. And there's like these ungodly-like walls that are ran by these troll-looking dudes. And that's exactly what these walls look like. And these are giant walls meant to separate people from what used to be their home. There are literally people in Palestine who live in homes now to where they can see their old land. They live high enough in these buildings, and they can see across miles to where their land used to be, to their old homes that now have Israeli flags on top of them. This is a form of colonialism. This is exactly what it is. And I mean, I could go into the politics and, you know, socialist aspects and capitalist aspects of everything, but I think I've ranted enough for now, and I'm thirsty, so please, I need to drink some water. But I don't know. Am I taking questions, Azim? I'm not.
Yeah, thank you first.
No problem.
And yeah, just because any of y'all have questions, and I'll try to say it the best as I can. But if you could speak loud enough, I can hear you correctly. So, can anybody have questions? You and then go around.
I was just wondering, during your time in Palestine, how much Palestinians know about the BDS movement and kind of their thoughts on it, and if they're involved in any ways, I guess, if they can be.
Not many of them are aware of the BDS movement per se. One thing that I did see in Palestine was that many Palestinians, they didn't want money. They didn't want anybody. They didn't want any extra soldiers. All they wanted was awareness for their cause. So for them, it's not necessarily that they want to be a part of the BDS movement here in America or anything, but it's that they want people in America to know about them. They feel like the world has forgotten about them. They feel like there's nobody out there who remembers the Palestinian people. I mean, one thing that's happening to Palestinian people that's definitely relatable to people in America is the same thing that happened to Native Americans. As in now we have indigenous Americans. We have indigenous Americans trying to get people to remember their country or to remember their land, to remember their people. I mean, you know, the same thing happened here. It was when when the Europeans came to this land, they said, hey, all right, we're only going to take a little bit. We're going to take a little bit of your land. You'll be all right. We'll displace you over here. We'll move you over there. Well, what happens when they moved over there? Then more Europeans came along and were like, no, we're going to move you over here now. Now these people are confined to reservations that they can't even maintain. So no, in Palestine, they don't really know about any of the pro-Palestinian movements in America. They're just more concerned about Americans and the rest of the world remembering that they exist, remembering who they are, remembering that they exist and that there is a lot of persecution going on in their land. Yeah, that's from what I think, or from my personal opinion. Yeah.
Thanks. I think you have you first. Then.
Yeah. Do you think Puerto Rico should work on seceding from the United States and pursue independence? And if so, what sort of government do you think they should install? Like, do you think they should try to steer away from a free market economy?
In my personal opinion, so here's the thing about something I forgot to tap on too, is that with the colonialism that happens in Palestine and Puerto Rico, is that the American and the Israelis are very good at turning the people against each other. So what happens is that you get Palestinians in Palestine who are turning in Palestinian rebels who rebel against Israel. Same thing happens in Puerto Rico, is that you have Puerto Ricans who are infatuated with their slave master. They're infatuated with Americans. They want to be Americans. They want to oh man, let's just live under America. America is great. We don't want to be independent. We don't want any of that. Well, the problem with that mentality is that if you, I don't know if any of you are parents, but if you have a child, your child cannot fully grow to be independent if they continue to live under you forever. Your child eventually has to break away from you in order to become independent. Now, your child may struggle. Your child may have bad days. Your child may have times when they want to come home, when they want to go back to their parent or whatever, but they have to learn how to struggle. They have to learn all these different things. And I personally think that is what should happen in Puerto Rico. I feel like Puerto Ricans need to focus on separating themselves from their slave master in order to become an independent nation, in order to become better about themselves. Because the problem is that Puerto Ricans have forgotten about their culture. They're forgetting about who they are because they're so infatuated with living underneath the United States. And personally, in my opinion, I think that if the day does come that Puerto Rico is able to succeed from the United States, I think that as of now, I think what they should go under is more of a socialist government. Because, and I say that because Puerto Rico would definitely need a lot of building. There would have to be a lot of building that would have to go on, a lot of separation, a lot of self-sufficiency that would need to be required, and all those different things. And I don't think those things can thrive under a capitalistic system. And I'm personally not a fan of capitalism at all. So I think that in a socialist system, if the people are educated correctly, that they will learn to take pride in themselves. They will learn to look out for their neighbor. They will learn to remember who they are. They will learn to break away from the slave master that once owned them. And they will learn that money and economics is not everything in life, that there is more to life than just the money aspect and things like that. So that's my opinion on that matter right there.
Thanks. Thanks for the question.
Yeah. Hi, thanks for coming, Randy. Appreciate it.
No problem. Can you guys give me 1 second, please? Give me 1 second. 1 second. You guys gonna have to excuse me. I'm at work and I'm in a cubicle and people got stuff printing out and
You're good, bro. You're good.
guys, please
Thanks for
continue.
coming. I was just wondering if you could comment on the corruption of the Palestinian leadership. Gaza Strip aside, if you could comment. So, like, for example, Mahmoud Abbas, who is the chairman of the Palestinian Authority, is currently sitting on his 13th year of a 4-year term. He's repeatedly denied the Holocaust. He said that when there is a Palestinian state, Jews will not be allowed to live there. Actually, just last month, Belgium withdrew funds from a Palestinian school because it was named after a terrorist who flew up a bus in 1978 and killed 38 Jews. So I'm just wondering if you could comment on that and how the leadership of specifically the Palestinian Authority, how that interferes with the peace process in that region.
Well, yeah, no, there's no doubt about it. I'm not going to sit here and sugarcoat it. There is corruption. I mean, I think that there's corruption in any political.
On the Palestinian Authority corruption. Can you comment on the leadership?
I'm sorry, I got a printer. I'm sorry, I can't hear my printer. I'm sorry. Repeat that one more time for me.
I was wondering, like, just from your perspective of what you learned while you were there. I just want to know, like, your opinions on the leadership of the Palestinians.
Okay, so in my personal opinion, I think that the Palestinian leadership is drawn. I think there's definitely a lot of different. How can I say it? There's too much. There's too many people trying to say, no, this is what we need to do. No, this is what we need to do. This is what we need to do. And the problem is that I'm not going to sugarcoat it. There is a disunity between a lot of the Palestinian political parties, and in that sense of of trying to acquire their freedom, acquire their country back. So yeah, there is definitely a lot of disunity in there, and yes, there is corrupt politics among them and things like that. But one thing that I did learn though is that the corrupt politics that is occurring there among the Palestinians, there is still a lot of Israeli influence in that. There is a lot of Israeli influence in the top Palestinian political leaders, because the Israeli government is approaching them and saying, all right, if you play ball our way, we'll make sure that your family is taken care of and we'll make sure that your pockets are filled. And is that right to betray your people? No, I don't think that's right at all. But that has a major influence on the way that they think and the way that they go about their political. So no, I think that's definitely an issue for sure. But for me personally, that's something that I can't necessarily comment too much on as not being a Palestinian myself and as not being a citizen of Palestine in that sense. But yes, it definitely is something that is occurring there for sure. Yeah.
And kind of just to like speak to your point about like the Israeli influence. I know in the Gaza Strip, I think last week, like Hamas and Fatah were supposed to meet together, but then Israel decided to like bomb a tunnel all of a sudden that killed 8 people. So there's of course like external forces that are at play.
Right.
Do you have questions? No. Oh, sorry. Any other questions?
Yes.
So I was just wondering if you could comment on, you mentioned the wall, that they call the barrier there. When it was built in 2003, it was built during the Second Intifada, which was essentially a Palestinian uprising that accomplished absolutely nothing other than the death of over 1,000 Jews and 3,000 Palestinians. And during that, it was from 2000 to about 2004, 2005, and during that 4.5-year span, there was over 145 suicide bombings alone. The youngest of which was a 14-year-old. And in 2003 is when they began constructing the wall, and statistics just show that after that wall began to go up, number of suicide bombings and terrorist attacks dropped. So I just wanted to hear like your commentary and what you learned over there just regarding the Intifada and the construction of the wall.
I think that that the intifadas that occur in Palestine are very much related to slave uprisings that occurred during slavery. If you look at slavery,
so would you consider suicide bombings and going into public markets?
Yeah.
No, I'll get to it. I think that with the uprisings, the intifadas are, like you said, they are uprisings. They are definitely uprisings by Palestinian people. But I think that one thing that people have failed to understand is that these uprisings aren't necessarily, they're not terrorist attacks, because the problem is that when you take a people, or let's say you take an animal, you take a dog and you put that dog in a corner. Well, that dog is only going to take being cornered for so long before it lashes out and attacks. And once that dog attacks, it doesn't care who's in its way. It doesn't care who it hurts. It just wants its freedom. It just wants to be let out of that corner. And what happens is that the same thing occurs among people, is that when you try to keep them down locked, when you try to keep them locked down for so long, when you try to keep what's theirs away from them, they will explode. It's a simple keg. It's a powder keg waiting to erupt. And what the problem is that when these things happen, the powder keg, when it erupts, it doesn't care who it hits. It doesn't matter at that point, because the problem is that not so much the powder keg erupt, but the problem is why did it erupt? Why is it even there in the first place? And so what happens is that, like you said, you have these suicidal bombings and things of this nature. Excuse me, guys.
Sorry.
No, it's all right. So what happens is that you have, like you said, yes, there are suicidal bombings that happen there. But the problem with the suicidal bombings is, yes, it is a problem that the bombings are happening. But the problem that we have to look deeper at is, why are they happening? Why is it the Palestinian people have resorted to blowing themselves up? Why is that occurring? Because they're not just walking in to places and just blowing themselves up just for, to have fun. There's a reason behind it. There is a reason that they are doing this. And I think that what's at a much greater, what needs to be looked at a much greater impact is, why are they doing this? Why is this the only form of rebellion that they have resorted to? You see what I'm saying? And you know what? It's not just the Palestinians that are going around and blowing themselves up. I'm not saying that there's Israelis going around blowing themselves up, but there was a man in 2000, and I think it was 2006, who went into the Prophet Ibrahim's mosque, which is a prophet that is recognized by Jews and Muslims. He went into there. He was an Israeli settler out of New York, out of Brooklyn, New York. He took an AR-15 that he bought in Israel and went in there and he killed over 100 Muslims. And he was rectified as a hero among the Israeli settlers. You see what I'm saying? That in itself is not a form of rebellion. That is a form of terrorism. That is not rebellion. That is terrorism. But when you have people that are contained like that underneath a powder keg and they blow up, yeah, it's a problem that they blew up. But the problem is, why did they blow up in the first place? What made them go that far off the deep end, essentially, to rebel like that. I think that's the much greater issue that we have to look at. You can't blame the sheep for rebelling against the wolf. You can't. But if the wolf attacks the sheep in that sense, then that's a different story. But you can't be mad at the sheep for trying to get away from the wolf. No, that's not logical. That doesn't make sense. And that's how I feel about that. I mean, peace in Palestine is something that I feel like Israel canceled a long time ago. You can't go into somebody's home and tell them to leave and expect them to be peaceful. That's not logical. That's not how humans work. We don't work like that. We're not animals. We don't submit that easily. If somebody came into your home, somebody came to my home and was like, hey, you got to go because I said so, you're either going to run or you're going to fight. And I think there has come a point where most Palestinians are tired of running. And they want to fight, and they're going to fight by any means necessary. And they will rebel by any means necessary.
Yeah.
Can I respond to that real fast?
I have a question.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Hello, thanks for coming. I think a lot of people want to try to equate the violence of the oppressed with the violence of the oppressor. And when we talk about Israel, we have to talk about one of the world's most powerful militaries compared to a dispossessed people. And I think that you alluded in your talk to a lot of the inequality that exists. You didn't use the word apartheid. I'm wondering if you would speak to that. And two, I think we have to make it clear that this is disproportionate violence used against the Palestinian people. The numbers of Palestinians killed every year by Israelis is incomparable, especially when you look at the massacres that happen in Gaza with like hundreds of children that are being killed. And so we have to actually stand with you talk about self-determination. And, there's been a lot of talk about, like a state for Palestinian people. And I'm just curious from what you've heard on the ground about, whether people see that as a viable solution or actually does an ethno-supremacist state, can that ever actually be, just, or does it actually, or like a two-state solution, can that actually be a just solution, or do we actually have to look at what it would take to have a real, equality for all people under one country, and what that sort of self.
Right. Yeah, I understand your question. One thing I'll say about the apartheid is that no, there's definitely an apartheid occurring for sure. But one thing I will say though is that the reason why I probably didn't use that is because I think there are many terms that we can use to refer to the Palestinian conflict as. It can be an apartheid, a colonization, militarization. There's many terms that we can refer to it as. But no, that is one of the terms. But from what I saw on the ground there was that the two-state solution is not wanted by Palestinians because it's their land. But I think in a realistic sense, and I'm saying this in the most logical sense, I will say this in, that I think it is impossible to not have a two-state existence at this point, because like there has been stated, there are many Israeli settlers there. There are, I would assume that their numbers are in the millions. But the problem is that Israel is trying to make it a one state in the sense of eliminating Palestinians. And not just, eliminating Palestinians, but they're trying to eliminate the culture and everything that comes with that. So I think that as of now, the two-state solution might be the only thing that could happen now. But do I think there should be a two-state solution? No, I don't think so. But the problem is that you have all these people that are already there, and you don't want the uprooting of one people to just send them somewhere else. We could send, the Israeli settlers to America. We've got plenty of room here. There's no shortage of land here, you know what I mean? But I think that's something that's we're obviously not all the Israeli settlers are going to be like, all right, let's get on a plane and go to America. Oh, no, they're not going to go do that. But it's nearly impossible for a one-state solution, or for both Palestinians and Israelis to be under one government. It's impossible at this point. But, so yeah, do I think a two-state solution probably needs to happen? No, I don't think it needs to happen, but I think that's the only thing that is going to necessarily be the solution. But at the same time, there's so many things that go into, well, whose land is this? Whose land is that? Well, they keep pushing our land, da 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 da, yada yada yada, and it's very complicated situation. Very, it's not a black and white situation in that sense. I hope that answered your question, though. I'm not too sure if that was viable to you.
Go ahead.
You mentioned something about the U.S.
I can't see him. Can we see him? I'd like to.
Sorry.
Can you move the camera right there? Yes, there it is.
You mentioned something about the U.S. giving several $1 million a day to the Israeli government, and like I've heard a lot of U.S. politicians say things like they're brokering for peace talks and stuff like this. Like, and me knowing American politicians, like they do lie a lot. Like
most politicians are liars. So yeah.
Like, I'm just wondering, like, it seems to me like the U.S. is complicit in this colonization. To what degree is that true?
I mean, when you're giving $10 million a day to Israel, I mean that says a lot. That speaks volumes. You know what I mean? And there was at one point when Obama came through and he was like, oh, we'll talk peace. And I think it's a stunt that every president has tried to pull, when they're like, oh, we'll talk peace. Oh, we'll talk peace. We'll talk peace. And, it never happens. And the problem is that because you're getting $10 million a day to Israel. I mean, if you're giving $10 million a day, that speaks volumes. You know what I mean? I mean, if there was a man that was robbing you every day and I was giving him $10 a day, that says I'm not on your side. That says a lot about me being on your side. You understand what I'm saying? So, you know what? And the thing is, I feel like the U.S. would be really hypocritical if they came in and they were like, all right, Israel, let's stop this shenanigans right now and let's really talk peace. Because then Israel can look at them and be like, well, wait a minute, you're the last one who needs to be talking about this right now. You know what I mean? So I think when you give $10 million a day to a country, that says a lot about where you stand with them politically and where you stand with them on anything that they do in that sense. Another thing I forgot to mention real quick, side note, is that in Puerto Rico, there's actually a monument dedicated to Israel there, but in the actual capital of Puerto Rico, when in reality, most Puerto Ricans stand with Palestine. So that's something that a lot of people don't know either, is that there is a shrine dedicated to Israel in Puerto Rico, even though there are Palestinians who fled Palestine and live in Puerto Rico to this day since 1948, and most of them stand with Palestine because they all can relate to each other. But I hope that answered your question, though, man.
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Not a problem. Not a problem.
Probably like a couple more questions. Almost 6 o'clock. Any more thoughts, questions? Yeah, go ahead, man.
Move over here where you can see me.
How you doing?
Good. Yeah, thanks for speaking with us. Could you say something about the U.S.-Mexico border wall as another example of trying to use a wall to enforce a system of oppression and colonialism? Yeah,
I mean, the wall that Trump is building, or I don't even think he's building it. I'm not sure what Trump is doing with this wall thing, but it's inhumane. You know what I mean? I mean, we do live in a society now where there no doubt has to be borders between countries. I mean, this is logical. There has to be borders between countries now because we have people that try to bring things in they shouldn't be bringing things out that they shouldn't be bringing in. I mean, human trafficking is something that's devastating the entire world, no matter where you live. So yes, there needs to be borders, but the thing is with these walls is that these walls, they dehumanize people. They make people, it's a dehumanizing thing when there is a giant wall that's basically telling you you're not welcome here. I mean, what does the wall essentially accomplish? I mean, when we're talking about specifically the U.S. and the Mexican border, it's obvious that no wall to this day has been able to stop the flow of Mexicans coming into the U.S. and the flow of people going out or Mexicans going in and out of the U.S. And not just Mexicans. I mean, you have many people that come from other countries into Mexico to get into the United States. So it's not just Mexicans. But the wall, I think personally, it's Trump trying to say, I'm trying to take care of the problem. When the problem isn't the wall, the problem is why are they leaving? Why are these people in such a hurry to get to the U.S.? Let's try and focus on that. And maybe if we focus on that, then we won't have to worry about this wall. But I think this wall is Trump's, you know, like he told everybody when he was running, I'm going to build the wall. I'm going to make Mexico pay for it. Mexico hasn't paid a cent for this wall. Mexico doesn't care about the wall. That's the problem, is that it's not so much, you know, you have to focus on why are they trying to leave? Why are they coming to the U.S. at such a rapid rate? And I don't think that we should turn away anybody. I think we need a system. We definitely need a system in place that allows people to come in, not the system that we have in place now, but I definitely don't think anybody should just be walking through the border just because they just want to walk through the border. I mean, there should be some sort of system in place saying, okay, you're in the country now. Let's try and find you home, but yada, whatever. But the wall, I think it's for show, personally. I think it's something that it's just to flex American power. It's just a muscle. You know what I mean? It doesn't actually hold any real strength, real value, but it's something that makes Americans who support this thing to feel secure at night. When in reality, the people that are crossing over these borders is going to find another way to get around it. There hasn't been anything that can stop them yet. So the wall it's an illusion, but at the same time, it's a problem because it makes these people feel like, wow, this country really doesn't want me in there. When there are people like me and other people who are like, no, if you want opportunity, if you want to better yourself, who are we as human beings to tell you not to better yourself? You know what I mean? And another thing that America does very well is that America claims to be, they don't claim it, but America has this Christianic values to it. We have all of our presidents who claim to be believers in God, that they're religious and all these different things. Well, Jesus himself was essentially a refugee in a sense. I mean, Jesus did a lot of traveling. Most of the prophets do a lot of traveling. Any prophet in the Bible, Torah, Quran, they did a lot of traveling. You know what I mean? And you can't, and part of that is accepting people too into your land, you know, and showing them goodwill and giving them what they need and trying to help them better themselves. But no, I think this wall thing is it's talk to make people feel secure. It's just for show, and people will find another way around it. That's what I think about it personally.
Yeah, thanks for your answer. And just a quick connection between the U.S. Border wall and the Israeli border wall. So Jeff Helper, he's an Israeli activist that lives in Israel, and he wrote a book called, I think, Weapons of War, I want to say. And he kind of talks about how Israel, the U.S. kind of they fund Israel to basically test technology on the Palestinians, and then they incorporate that back into the U.S. So the border wall, the material that is gonna, because they're probably gonna build it, or the technology there was first tested out on Palestinians in Israel. So, and then we just buy it back. So it's this weird exchange, I guess. So yeah, they basically take the technology from Israel and enforce it at our border wall. And yeah, does that make sense? Cool. All right, last question. Anybody? Nope, y'all good? Cool. Thanks, Randy. Thanks for stepping in.
I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Do I just end it, or?
Yeah, you want to stop broadcast? Do you have that on your thing?
I'm trying to figure it. I've never had to use this before. I'm gonna go ahead and.
I got it. I got you.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, guys. Thank you. Take it easy.